What is the science of reading? What are leaders doing to accelerate reading achievement? We answer these questions and more in Science of Reading Leadership, Guiding Minds, Transforming Lives, powered by Just Right Reader.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Science of Reading Leadership podcast. We have a real treat for everyone today. Our guest is Dr. Tanya Wilson-Thevanesan. I'm going to say that again.
That was perfect, Christy.
Our guest today is Dr. Tanya Wilson-Thevanason, and she is the Deputy Superintendent for School Improvement and Community Engagement in Fairport Central School District. As an equity-driven leader, Tanya amplifies student voice and works to eliminate barriers and disparities impacting access. She is passionate about women in leadership and is committed to sponsoring and promoting women as cabinet members and superintendents. She leads professional development across the region in culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy and serves as a panelist and speaker on closing access gaps for women in educational leadership. Tanya, welcome. We are so excited to have you.
I'm equally excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I love everything in your bio is so encouraging and uplifting. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. I want to ask you first and foremost, how did you get into education? Like, what was the why behind it? What brought you to education?
Yeah, thank you for that question. For me, I was one of those kids where school was my place. It worked for me, right? And so I remember as a kindergartner thinking, I'm going to be a teacher. And that stuck with me all through high school and into college. And for one small second, I thought maybe I'll be a pharmacist. I don't know why that was in my head, but I never veered from that path. And so it was always who I was meant to be, I think, an educator.
I love that.
Love that. There's definitely an aspect I think we can all agree of education as being a part of our calling on some level. Right. Tell us a little bit more about your district, Fairport Central. We would like to know just a little bit of kind of background, demographics, the students and staff that you lead.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fairport Central School District is a suburb of Rochester, New York. So New York is a big state. When I say I'm from New York, people usually think, oh, the city. Well, we're about 6 hours from New York City. Rarely go there. But a suburb of Rochester, New York, our district has about 5,500 students. And we have 8 schools across that serve those students. And our population is majority white. We have about 87% of our students are white. We have a growing population of immigrants coming to our area, and that population has grown in the last 5 to 6 years and almost doubled. And so the changing demographics in our area have really highlighted for me and for our leadership team some of the gaps we've had in serving all of our students and serving all of our students well. Oftentimes what I've found in suburbs is when you have when you're meeting your benchmarks, right? So 92% graduation rate and majority students on their way to college and careers, it's easy to sit back and rest on our laurels and say, we're doing our job. And then I like to focus on that 8% that aren't graduating on time, that we're not serving well. And when I dig into the data, for me, it's who haven't we met the needs of? And a lot of that comes from my background in working in the Rochester City School District. So prior to being in Fairport, I'm in my 3rd year there. I was in Rochester City School District for 21 years. And in that setting, I worked in 2 different schools under receivership models and for New York State. And so we really had to pay attention to who we weren't serving.
I'd love to know a little bit more about that journey. I know that I think you had said earlier that you were a principal of an elementary and a middle, and you kind of led both of those schools out of state monitoring, and your platform for doing so was was literacy. Can you tell us more about that process? I think especially considering that you have both of those levels of experience, the middle and the elementary, sometimes when we talk science of reading, we really focus on our primary learners. And so would love
Sure.
for you to know about how you did that at the middle level as well.
Yeah, yeah. So when I became a principal in the Rochester City School District, my first school was School 29, Adlai E. Stevenson School 29. Large population of special education students. We also housed our long-term suspension students from across the elementary schools in the Rochester City School District. So I had a really interesting mix of students in a neighborhood school. And when I got there, our proficiency rate in ELA was 0%, zero. And we were on our way to being a school that was going to either be shut down or taken over. And I came in and said, this is not acceptable. What are we going to do? And we approached it in two ways at that school. It was really, how do we involve our families and wrap around all the care that our kids need? And how do we get our kids reading on grade level? So we approached it in two ways. And so I partnered with our local Boys and Girls Club. We created a 9 to 5 school, 9 a.m. to 5 o'clock. We served 3 meals. And through the Boys and Girls Club was able to hire many of my families as our wrap care people. And so in doing that, right? So we provide much needed income, but also we were directly, but not necessarily intentionally training our families in the things that we were doing in school too. And so our kids were getting everything they needed at home and at school. And we created a walk to intervention model, and that really changed everything. And we focused on reading. At the time, I had no idea what I was doing, just to be completely frank, just to put it out there.
Everyone who's ever been a principal on the other side of this podcast listening totally agrees with and totally can relate to.
I was like, who put me in charge of something, right? And when I looked at our test scores, 0% proficiency rate, I said, our kids can't read. And yet when I'm talking to teachers who are using, Fontes and Pinnell or all the other reading measures that we had at that point, they're like, oh, they're a level K. Well, that's not translating. Whatever that level you just said to me does not translate. And also, I am not trained. I'm not a literacy specialist. I'm not a reading teacher. I was a math major in college and a special education teacher by trade and in high school. So when I got to elementary, I was like, oh gosh, the kids can't read. I don't know how to teach them how to read. So I did what every great educator does. I went to the research and I said, what works? So I went to the What Works Clearinghouse and said, who's got the biggest bang? Who's got the biggest impact? And I was surrounded by some really smart people. And so we built that walk to intervention model and started to do things like, and I'm just going to name a few things. It doesn't actually matter as long as it's grounded in the research, but we had 95%. We were using foundations, right? And so we got kids on grade level reading. We celebrated the heck out of kids when they moved up a level. I had, at this point, because it was now 15 years ago, we had a room that was just filled with sticky notes of kids and where their levels were. And then we would move the level and I would bring them in and say, you made it to the next level. And we would move their sticky note and make a really big deal. Now we have fancy spreadsheets to do all that, but it was really impactful and powerful. And in 5 years, we went from 0% proficiency in ELA to 5% proficiency in ELA. And that doesn't feel like a huge gain, but that was so great. And 0% in math, 7% proficiency in math. We weren't focusing on math, let's just be clear. Even though I was a math major, we were focusing on reading. But when kids can read, they can access everything. And so that was my journey at School 29.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll pause for just a second. Any questions on that one?
No, I think that just listening to the honesty of I didn't know what I'm doing really sets the groundwork for being able to say, I don't have any preconceived ideas. I don't have any idea of what has worked for me in the past. Let me start at the research. Let me start with what is working and start there. And I think that that's really something I want to highlight and pinpoint, because a lot of times We do. We come with our preconceived ideas. We
Mm-hmm.
come with what has worked for us in the past or what we loved in the past.
Right.
And when
Right.
we started the research, we start with something that has shown to be working, and now we can only go from there. Like, then we can
Yeah.
start to identify where we want to pivot and where we want to move. So I think
That's right.
that creates a solid foundation, and that's really something to applaud. I want to know what you're doing, because you're clearly doing a lot of work around literacy, right?
Yeah.
Now
Yep.
that you've had that history and you're here now in Fairport Central Schools, what are you doing to establish that instructional infrastructure
Yeah.
around high quality literacy instruction?
Yeah. I'll just, before I answer that, I just want to just say, when I went, so after that School 29 experience, I went to a middle school, and I got there and I'm thinking, okay, our graduation rate from the high school there. So it's East High. If anybody's ever spent any time in Rochester, you know the story of East. It was being shut down by New York State. Again, poor performance. We entered a partnership with the University of Rochester, and they came in and basically ran our school with us. And I was the middle school principal, and my whole sole purpose as the middle school principal, again, remember that I'm a math major, was to make sure my kids could read at grade level. I had kids in 6th, 7th, 8th grade that were reading at 2nd grade level. You're not going to graduate from high school if you're reading at 2nd grade level. You're not in, forget about graduation. You're not able to access the world when you are reading at a 2nd grade level, right? And so that was my sole purpose, was to send those kids to high school, closing that gap in literacy. And that's what we did. And our graduation rate at the high school grew from 53% graduation to 87% graduation in 5 years. And it really, I mean, lots of things went into that, but at the foundation is kids being able to read.
Wow.
Fast forward to moving to Fairport, and this is my naive self thinking, okay, I'm going to the suburbs, right? There's money, there's resources, there's people, right? This gap is not going to exist. Oh, it does. It does exist.
Yes,
And it was
it does.
exacerbated by COVID. And the kids in general that we were not serving, again, were the historically marginalized people that we have neglected historically in education. And, you know, just knowing a little bit about my background so far, that's unacceptable to me. So I get there, and thankfully I was, again, surrounded by some really, really smart people. My team is some of the best and most humble of any educators that I've met, and also really focused on that research, right, Terry, like you highlighted before. And so when I got there, the conversations around what did we need to do next, what training did our teachers need to understand, and what was happening at intervention when kids went to intervention. And there was a huge gap there. This is going to sound really, really bad, but one of the comments when I first got to Fairport was, kids are in intervention and they stay there forever. Well, that's not an intervention. That is like, that's just your program now, right? So that's not how.
And Tanya, I don't think that sounds bad, because I think we have schools all over the country who are experiencing similar things, that once you're in intervention, rarely do they actually get caught up, right?
Right.
And so I think that will resonate. And I would love to know, have you reversed that trajectory?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one of the things we found out, there's two pieces to that puzzle, right? Number one, we had way too many kids going to intervention. And so if you think about that RTI triangle, our top portion was way too high. It should be about 3 to 5% of students needing tier 3 intervention when you have a solid instructional program. And we were more like 23 to 30%, depending on the building, that needed tier 3. And I was like, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. So we needed to get after our tier 1 instruction, right? Because when you have that many kids that are in need of intervention, it's telling you there's a tier 1 issue. And then the other piece was, when they went to intervention, what research-based interventions were we using, and were we using them with fidelity? And the answer was no. And so we've completely overhauled our entire system. And so last year, we started a pilot with a very strong science of reading based approach. So there's a phonics strand and there's a comprehension strand to our ELA instruction. So we started that pilot last year. This year is our first full implementation year of that solid tier 1. But in the last 3 years at our intervention model, again, we've used a very solid research-based intervention. And so I was just presenting our data to our board the other day. In our K-5 system, we had 23% of our students were identified for tier 3 services. That was in September. In January, we were able to reduce that number to 15%. We are doing the right things. We are moving kids. Kids can read. And like I said before, when you can read, you can access anything.
This episode is brought to you by Just Right Reader. At Just Right Reader, we make decodable books in English and Spanish that are great for kids, schools, and families. Our decodables tell authentic stories of student lives, follow a rigorous phonics progression, and include a short video phonics lesson that reinforces learning at home and in school. To learn more about accelerating reading achievement with decodables, visit justrightreader.com. I love the fact that, well, first of all, the way you speak is always so affirming. I love the fact that you said it's working. We are moving children, and you're not just feeling that way. You have the research, you have the numbers behind it. You have the numbers that are showing that movement and showing that trajectory. Can you tell us a little bit more about that solid tier 1 instruction you were referring to? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm going to name the programs just for conversation purposes. But again, it's not about necessarily which program you decide to do. It's doing them with fidelity and making sure that they hit those 2 parts of the rope, right? So our phonics instruction is 95%. That's our core. Everybody does it. And then our comprehension strand is wit and wisdom. And when I tell you, so one of the things that frustrates me the most right now about the pushback on the science of reading is people saying, oh, it's so boring. It's, you're going to kill kids with the skill and drill and nobody likes it. I have done over 200 classroom visits this school year. And when I walk into a classroom and they are doing their 95% phonics lessons, the joy of the children is ridiculous. It is so fun to be in a space where kids are, finding success and the teachers are celebrating it. And you wouldn't think that a digraph would get kids that excited, and it does. It does.
It's so fun to unlock the code.
So
when you don't know the code, it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, as human beings, we know when we're learning and we know when we're not. Right. Yep. And when we were just guessing, when we were just kind of guessing at reading, we knew we were just guessing at reading. But when you know you're learning and you know you're gaining code and you know you're getting the strength to read, like, it's exciting.
It's so exciting. One of the pushbacks that you hear sometimes is, you're taking the joy out of reading. You know who loves to read? Kids that can read. We have to teach them how to read. That's joyful. I see it every day when I enter a K-5 classroom in my district. Like, it is so exciting. And to watch 5th graders get really excited about breaking apart words into their segments, figuring out if that was the right spelling rule that they had learned and why it's not, and having conversations and celebrating mistakes and like growing from those things, and teachers acknowledging that they didn't even know how to spell that word, or why the I becomes before E, and all of those things, right? Like, it is so encouraging and exciting to see. And then on the other side, the comprehension piece, you can't neglect the fact that we need to build background knowledge. You can't neglect the fact that kids need rich and deep vocabulary. So you do all of that together, and you're creating young people that can access anything they want to access in the world. And it's really, really exciting. And I don't want to forget, because my team would kill me if I didn't say, and handwriting. You have to write. It is so important to write. And that's actually one of my favorite things about the product that that you all have, is that there is practice for writing those words, because you have to have that physical piece. Otherwise it doesn't click in your head.
Yep.
Right. And so you have to do that. So there you
Yeah.
go, Jess Jones. Don't forget the head.
We work with so many researchers who just continually talk about that reading writing connection and how important
Yeah.
that is. So
Yeah, you have to.
Tanya, I'm interested a little more. You've already alluded a little bit to the importance of getting families involved, particularly when you were a principal, and some creative ways you did that. You also currently have a first grader of your own at home who's learning how to read.
Right.
Would love to know just about how your experiences as an administrator and now your experiences as a mom of a child who's learning how to read, how have those impacted your views on the role of families in supporting literacy?
Right. Yeah. I think we oftentimes as educators can get into a rut where we blame families for not being supportive of the work that's happening in schools. And the reality is, I've never met a family that doesn't want the very best for their child. And they will do anything in partnership with a school if we equip them to do things in partnership with a school. And I think that's where we fall short as leaders sometimes, is we're not giving our families the tools that they need to support our kids, and wrap all those pieces around. So that's one of the things like that I did at School 29 that I continue to try to do in Fairport. And then as a mom, I see it. I see it with my little guy, who I actually have 3 children. Let me just name them all, because otherwise, he's the fave. He is my only boy, but my oldest is actually a junior in high school.
Okay.
And so it's been a while since I've been down the reading journey, and it's been really, really exciting for me to watch it with my son, who's a first grader. And then my baby just turned 5. She's in UPK. And so she's in that early literacy foundations world. And we have a very rich house of conversation, of experiences, of knowledge, of building those comprehension pieces, right? And I don't drill my kids. I don't sit and go over letter sound connections and things like that, because I know that's not where it needs to happen. It's when my son comes home with his little book bag, and I know he's working on endings for known words, right? And so I sit with him and have him read, and when he starts to word guess, I know as an educator that's not the right thing to do, and so I stop him and pause him and help him to use the skills that he already has. Now, I know that because I've spent some time in schools, right? And I've spent some time in the research. Most parents don't know to do that. And if you were taught to read by word guessing, you think that that's normal. So what I love about the books that we are now sending home with our kids in Fairport is that that QR code teaches families, you've equipped them to do exactly what we need them to do. And it takes the guesswork out of, how do I support my kiddo? And we equip them to do that. And I actually just got an email from a parent. So we just started our pilot with Just Right Reader. So we sent home book bags, I think about a week and a half ago. I just got an email from a parent who was like, thank you so much. I have never seen my kids so excited to read. He has read his book bags through 6 times. He loves them so much. And it's because he has success. It's because he has that joy. And she's like, I know how to support my kid. And he'll pick up other books now and read those too, where that wasn't happening before.
And you got that email as an assistant superintendent.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is pretty incredible, because I imagine at the assistant superintendent level, you don't get a lot of positive emails.
Oh no, I usually get called in when there's a problem. And so that is my favorite thing to hear, is it's working, right?
So
And
usually teachers get positive emails. Sometimes your principals will, because they've had a relationship with the families.
Right. Yeah, no, it's great. It's so exciting. And when I see the little ones because we personally handed out the books. And so when I see the little ones, I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I know some of the older siblings too, because of the work that I do across. So I've had conversations with older siblings like, Isaac, don't forget to have your brother read to you tonight. There's a QR code. Make sure you use it, right? And so it's equipping full families with that ability to support.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And it's watching as a mom, my kiddo unlock the code for reading is so exciting. It's just, it hits different this time than it did with my older one, just because I know what I didn't know then.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's reading random words as we're driving down the highway. And I'm like, oh, and I better watch my text messages now, because he knows how to decode anything that I write. So,
Every parent's nightmare when they can start to read your text.
I can read all the things. Yeah, no, it's so fun. It's so fun to watch.
So I want to know what advice, right? Because like you said, there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of pushback with the science of reading. Yep. There's just so much going on. And you've seen so much success. What advice do you give district leaders as they start to navigate all of this stuff, right, on their plates? How do we navigate that, and what advice would you give them?
Yeah, in no particular order. But here's some of the things I think are key. Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, and listen to the people that are smarter than you. I think oftentimes as we advance in our careers in any system, you become maybe the most educated person in the room, or for whatever reason, think you're the smartest person in the room. And when you're not humble enough to say, I'm not a trained literacy expert, you're going to fall. So surround yourself with people and then listen to them. Ground yourself in research. This research is not new. It's existed forever. And you need to go back to that research whenever you're thinking about adopting or implementing any kind of program. I would also say that, and we touched on a little bit, but make sure that you're equipping your families to support whatever's happening. It's the unknown that can fester and build in a system. And so just being upfront, like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is how you support. And of course, we'll take feedback. Of course, we want to hear from you if it's not working for you and your family. And just demystify the whole piece, right? So I think from the start, demystifying that for families and for teachers. Don't forget that that tier one, your classroom teachers need to truly understand the why behind why the shift is happening, so that they can explain that to families. Because like you mentioned, Christy, they're the ones that have the relationships with the families. If we all of a sudden shift and teachers aren't bought into it, they could unintentionally derail that. And so you really, really need to make sure. So we've trained all of our teachers K-5 in letters training right now. And that's a serious undertaking. And it's important. So whatever you decide as a district on how you're going to train your teachers, make sure you do it, and make sure you do it really, really well, so that they can be your biggest champions. I think just if I were just to like cap it all together, make sure that as you're entering this journey, you're taking something off the plates of people as well. It is a big undertaking, and you can't do it and do everything else you've been doing. And so sometimes teachers need permission to let go of, wait, listen, I know this feels uncomfortable, and I know this feels different because you're not listening to kids read and giving them a letter. And it's okay. Take those kits, and they're going away. No longer are we doing that, and this is why we're not doing it. But you have to say that to teachers, because otherwise they're like, okay, now I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this, right? And you can't. You're going to break a system. So if you've spent any time in implementation science, you have to take something off the plates of people.
Absolutely. Tanya, before we close out, is there anything else you wish that we would have asked you today?
I think, if in my work, in such a strong focus on equity, none of this happens without relationships. It's relationships with your staff, it's relationships with your families, and then it's that teacher to student relationship is so critical. Kids aren't going to learn from people that they don't trust and care for and know that that is reciprocal. So don't lose sight of the fact that relationships are the most important thing whenever you are working with kids, when working with families and working with people. So that's really key. And then I think the other piece too is on a different vein, in your scheduling, protect First Teach. All kids need access to grade level content, to rigor, to high level vocabulary. And when we take kids away from that tier one, we are so limiting them in the end. They need that knowledge base. Everybody needs access to that. And so it's really, really critical that that intervention model is not taking away from First Teach.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
important.
That's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful way to like bring this to a wrap. But I really want us to be able to connect with you and follow all of the beautiful things that you're doing in your district. So where can anyone find you if they want to learn more, if they want to connect, if they just want to follow you? How can they do that?
So it'll always be Twitter for me, never the other letter that it has changed to. On Twitter, you can find me at Dr. DRTTEE Wilson, Dr. T Wilson. So DRTEE Wilson. And then on LinkedIn, I am at Tanya-Wilson-Thevanesan -ed. So I would love to connect with you all. I celebrate the heck out of everything we're doing in Fairport and across the country. And I will also be your biggest champion. So I'll follow you back and like everything you do that's working for kids too.
Thanks. We'll make sure to put both of those in the show notes. So Tanya, thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom today. It's been amazing to hear how you've supported literacy across your entire educational leadership journey. And so we just appreciate you. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much. And until next time.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you soon.
Thanks for joining us. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. We will see you next time on Science of Reading Leadership, guiding minds, transforming lives.